Welcome to Uncommon Ground. I'm Talal Yassin. My guest today is Senator Fatima Payman, who at just 27 became the first hijab-wearing Muslim woman ever elected to the Australian Parliament, a moment that has resonated deeply across the country and especially within my community. In this conversation, Fatima talks about her journey from refugee roots to the halls of power, the values that guide her leadership, and the personal cost and responsibility of breaking barriers. She also reflects on what representation means for the next generation of Australians who are watching her example. If you've ever wondered what courage looks like in politics today and how conviction and community can shape a career in public life, this is the episode you won't want to miss. Assalamu alaikum, Fatima Payman. Welcome to Uncommon Ground.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're a star of the show, present everywhere in Australia on media, corporate media, social media, in the Muslim community. But as I talk to people, it seems to me that they actually know very little about you. The real Fatima Payman, my friend and colleague. And I want to start today by going back right to the beginning. What is the first memories of Fatima Payman as a child as she awoke to the world?
My earliest memory is using my little brother, who's 5 years younger than me, to escape chores and go outside and play cricket in Pakistan. I remember those early years in Pakistan where Dad had already, traversed the Indian Ocean to come to Western Australia, but I didn't really know at that time what was going on. All I knew was Dad's out of the country, so it's just me, my mum, and two siblings. And yeah, that was normal life to me. But I think my first sort of understanding of, wow, we've actually moved to a different country was when we arrived at the airport and I saw my dad after 3 years because left Afghanistan in 1999. And mum had no idea if he had made it alive for like 3 months since his departure. So it was this weird sense of the family reunion made it feel like we had returned home, even though Australia was such a foreign country to us. And yeah, then that sort of journey of like understanding the language, the way of life, my parents working really hard to make sure we retained our language, and then starting school, making friends, like all that sort of happened. But I definitely remember that moment where I saw my dad for the first time in a long time. And I was like, wow, we're home. And as an 8-year-old, you can't really fathom how I got there. You're just like, oh my God, I get to see Dad again.
Awesome. So your dad, I want to go back a little bit
Hmm.
back in history. Um, your dad, when the Taliban came in, your dad escaped in 1999 or probably 1998.
Before that, so I was born and then um, sort of a year and a half later was when the Taliban came. This is just at the end of 1996. And they had to flee to Pakistan. My grandfather was involved with the government at the time, and so they were headhunted, and it to uproot the entire family, move to Peshawar in Pakistan, and start a life from scratch. Dad being the eldest son meant he had assumed a lot of responsibility in the absence of my grandfather, who was abducted by the Taliban at the time. But then Dad went and, got him out. And, you know, in hindsight, now that I think of it, I didn't ask enough questions of my dad. Him passing away in 2018 to leukemia just makes me realize like there are such nuggets of gold that I've missed out because I just wasn't curious enough to know what exactly happened. So they're like fragments and parts of stories that I try to piece together and say, oh wow, like this is where the whole entire story began.
Well, I mean, you're as a kid living in Perth, and you probably dad had various sets of trauma from all that happened. So he wasn't about to put it in a book
No.
and unsolicited, present it because he got through a lot. Your granddad was a member of the Afghanistani Parliament. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Again, these are fragments of stories, so I wouldn't be able to say exactly what his role was, but I knew that he was headhunted because he had affiliations with the government. And obviously, the Taliban saw anyone affiliated to the government as traitors to the country. And so that was the whole reason of why the family had to, you know, uproot and move to Peshawar. But yeah, I think dad was always politically switched on. Um, when we would have conversations as I was growing up, in my early teens, dad would say, I'll take you back to Afghanistan and, we'll run a campaign for you and get you elected and you can follow your grandfather's footsteps. And I think he would say that because he never thought I would ever get a chance in Australia, a hijab wearing young immigrant. Like, who's going to put her in parliament? Nobody looked like me in parliament. Um, but dad knew the system in Afghanistan quite well. So he was always, thinking about how we go back and help rebuild and shape Afghanistan for the better.
So the political gene flows in the family. So there's no question about where did Fatima Payman get this political skill. It's deeply embedded in the genetics, it seems. But we'll get back to that. Um, in terms of what's happening in Afghanistan now, and I'm going back to history, how do you feel about it? Like,
It's
what do you think?
devastating. It's so devastating. I mean, if dad hadn't risked his life, I would still be in Afghanistan. I would probably have a bunch of kids and, be locked up at home. It almost feels like Afghanistan's just been in this constant turmoil. Um, Wars, famine, devastation, deprivation of human rights for women and girls, and the repression we constantly see, especially since the fall of Kabul 4 years ago, uh, just you sometimes lose hope. And I want to hold on to that hope and I want to inspire the diaspora communities outside of Afghanistan to hold on to that faith. But yeah, the interference of various parties and nation states getting involved in Afghanistan is what's caused it to where it is today. And yeah, now with the recent earthquakes, like that devastation is just prolonged. And yeah, the injustice against women is just growing, and it's not what Islam has said, and I highlight that, people should not conflate what the Taliban's rulings are with Islam because they're contradicting one another, and I think one of the biggest thing I've learnt being raised in a Western society is making that conscious decision to learn about the faith and hold on to the values and morals that the faith teaches us rather than just having it passed down as part of the culture. Because in Afghanistan, there are things people do that's very cultural, but nothing to do with the faith. And people have just completely convoluted the two concepts and ideas and way of life because they think, oh, well, just because my name's Muhammad, I was born a Muslim. I don't know what it means to be a Muslim though, because it's just part of the culture. Whereas my parents were very intentional with the way we understood the faith. And my earliest memory growing up was I had just turned 12 years old and I told mum and dad that I wanted to wear the hijab. And I was going to an Islamic school, so it kind of felt natural. But I remember dad sitting me down and saying, this is a lifelong commitment. This is a big decision. You need to be ready and you need to know why you're doing this. Why are you wearing the hijab? Why have you decided this? Because, it's not for me or your mum to decide when you wear it. It's when you're ready. And giving me that sense of responsibility as a 12-year-old, you're like, oh yeah, that's huge. Um, but this is something that I'm gonna think about and read. And so I did my research and I came back a few days later and I was like, yeah, I'm dead set. I want to wear the scarf. And, my younger sister had her own journey and wore it a few years later. But my parents have always been of the opinion that, when you're making decisions for yourself, be you need to be you need to have the strength of your convictions behind it. You can't just make haphazard decisions out of haste, and whatever the outcome might be, then, like, you have to deal with the consequences. So, yeah, I really do appreciate my parents for giving us that sense of responsibility and ownership on our decisions.
Take me back to when you arrived in Australia, clearly, that's sort of when you woke up to the world. What was it like living in Perth as a young Muslim Afghan child who'd become Australian?
Yeah.
Talk to me about it.
Um, it was I never felt different. My parents were quite social. We had a lot of family friends. Dad made a point of taking us to the beach every Sunday. Um, we would we would try new things, so we're quite an adventurous family. We'd go for holidays with the rest of the relatives, like down south to Margaret River, and it was just beautiful. And so growing up, I never felt like I was out of place. Yes, the language was a bit, you had to get used to, but and growing up, you kind of have an accent, and then it just goes away. But being going to an Islamic school, being raised in the northern suburbs of Perth, like I just felt like a regular Australian. I was like, yeah, this is what this country is all about. Because you would see people of diverse backgrounds. Like for my mum, it was the first time she'd seen someone from an African background. Like she never knew about it, and it was weird. But like there was clear cultural um differences, but my parents were quite open to like accepting and learning the new way of life, but holding on to our cultural roots and our language. But I think it wasn't until I started wearing the hijab that felt a bit out of place. And when I say a bit out of place, you start getting weird stares and you notice people making remarks. And we would have a lot of I'll go back to where you came from, or towel head, or, all these sort of derogatory terms where you're like, why are you singling me out? Like, you don't volunteer to stand out, people make you feel like you don't belong. But I didn't take note of it until, I guess, I went to university, because all my schooling years were at an Islamic school, similar faith, similar background, similar teachings, people, dressed the same way. But yeah, first year of university was like the biggest shock of my life.
So tell me about which Islamic school you went to and a bit more about that. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, I went to Australian Islamic College, the Dinella campus until I was in year 10, and then year 11 and 12 in the Kewdale campus. It was it was an awesome environment. I took up leadership positions. I was naturally the teacher's pet. A lot of my peers hated me, but
School captain.
yeah, so it's the first head girl of AIC Kewdale. And yeah, I just had the snack, I guess, because I'm the eldest of four children. I was always made in charge of them. So at school, the teacher sort of saw those characteristics and they were like, okay, sure, you can be a prefect, and then moved on to being head girl. But it was a wonderful school environment where we saw teachers from all faiths and backgrounds. Yes, they were required to wear the headscarf, but it was wonderful to see how they put the effort in to like learn about the faith and abide by the special rulings. I mean, there were certain classes where we were segregated, and it definitely was a good preparation ground for like what's to come at university. But I don't think that it prepared me well enough for the real world. Going to University of Western Australia, and like in the first tutorial, you stand up to like introduce yourself. My name is Fatima Payman. I'm studying my bachelor's in science and doing biomedical science and, looking forward to becoming a doctor one day. And that was only because my parents insisted, like,
Of course.
doctor, engineer, or lawyer. And I'm like, yeah, no, not the last two. But medicine, yeah, why not? And yeah, when you're standing in front of your, you know, tutorial class and introducing yourself, and someone puts their hand up and goes, "Do you have a bomb under that thing on your head?" You're like, "Bro, what? How did you make it to university with that mindset?" You thought that university being such an incredible, prestigious institution where you go to debate ideas and learn and increase your level of knowledge to be better citizens out in the world. You're asking me this question? Like, seriously?
In the first class.
In the first class. And so I was like, wow, I've got my work cut out for me. But again, because my dad never made me feel any less of a son. Whether it was his business meetings or when we were building the house, I was negotiating with men 3 times my age. He would always say, as a daughter, you're better than 10 sons put together and you're capable of doing anything. And so with that level of confidence, I was like, well, if this guy thinks I've got a bomb under that thing on my head, I'll accept that challenge. And by the end of the semester, I had made an effort to like educate him about Islam for him to get to know me to the point where we were like good friends by the end of it.
And now you're married. No.
No, I hadn't met Jacob then. No, it would have been a whole different story. But yeah, it was incredible. It was incredible to like have accepted that challenge rather than allowing that moment to define what the next 4 years of my university life was going to look like.
But that must have been so confronting.
100%.
Like, it's confronting for anybody. I remember my 1991 going on to Sydney University, which is the equivalent of Western Australia. And it was a total new world. And for someone to call you out like that,
Yeah.
that would have been very confronting.
Yeah.
I mean, did you go home and talk to your mum and dad and say...
No, so I did. I guess being teacher's pet and a prefect or a head girl, I was used to, pushback and resistance or people like not agreeing with me. So, I wasn't dying to become this person's best friend, but I knew, like, I didn't take it to heart, essentially. Like, I remember leaving that class thinking, all right, so this guy probably hasn't met someone that looks like me. How am I going to educate him enough so that he doesn't go around asking this question of other girls? Like, it's just, mate, that's just not on. Like, you don't say stupid things like that. But yeah, no, I don't remember telling my parents about it because, again, I've always thought that, my parents have enough on their plate. I don't need to like add to their pressure and stress. So I've taken quite a lot, and like having my younger siblings join me at university and then, helping and guiding them through their journeys was something that a role that I just assumed naturally being the eldest. So, no, I didn't let that get to my skin. And I think that level of resilience just builds your character. And, you grow up to whatever the odds are, whatever the challenge is, you fight it, you do your best, and whatever the outcome is, that's, my parents would always say, you do your best, and whatever the outcome is, it's up to God Almighty. But as long as you've done your best.
Take me to your brothers and sisters for a minute and we'll come back to you. So you're the eldest of 4. Tell me about them.
So I've got a sister who's a year and a half younger than me, and then a brother who's about 4 years younger than me, and then a baby brother who's 9 years younger than me.
I bet he hates you calling him that, my baby.
My baby brother. Oh, I literally raised him, but he's such a cutie. Sina, I love you to bits. So the youngest he's studying in mining engineering. I mean, you gotta, when you're from WA, mining's the biggest thing ever. So, the second eldest, Salman, is a civil engineer. He's the one I have very deep philosophical discussions with, like around the kitchen table. We're always debating about things, coming up with new ideas. And my sister, who got married quite young and has the 4-year-old beautiful son who a lot of people think is my baby, and I'm like, I will own him any day. I'll adopt him, Ibrahim. But yeah, so my sister's a pharmacist, and yeah, she's got a beautiful son, and it's just wonderful to have seen my siblings grow into such independent, strong individuals, um, with their own features and characteristics that resembles a lot of dad's traits. So like we each have something of dad in us. And so yeah, mum always reflects on how I've got like dad's sort of visionary outlook, being quite confident, um, and social, whereas Salman, for example, has dad's patience. Um, the youngest has dad's looks. So it's just really adorable when mum like reflects on that. But yeah, uh growing up I'd say I was really close with Salman because I was a tomboy. With my sister I only grew close once we were both at university, and it was just the two of us bussing it to uni. Um and yeah, later on we both started Masters of Pharmacy together. Because obviously with biomedical science, I fell in love with anthropology and sociology, and oh my goodness, my parents were like in absolute denial. They're like, there is no ways you're doing an arts degree. What's an arts degree? Like, what's it gonna end up in? Um, but then, yeah, when dad got sick with leukemia, I remember one of his final wishes were, can I want you to have a stable financial future. So, arts is great, but do you want to go into pharmacy? Because they'd given up on medicine, because I faint at the sight of blood. So I'm not. Yeah, I've got a very weak heart when it comes to blood. But yeah, so I did pharmacy just because dad was like, it would be good for you to have an independent financial future and stand on your own feet and whatnot. Um, but yeah, then soon realized while I was studying pharmacy that it's just not for me. And I had to make that tough decision when I was getting pre-selected to run as the Senate candidate for the Labor Party, or do my 1 year internship for pharmacy. And yeah, I went with the pre-selection.
We'll get back to the pre-selection. So take me to your days at university. So you had your you know uh, I guess first day on the campus, being told do you have a bomb under that? Talk me through what happened. What else happened at university?
Uni days were a bit unsettling because you had all this freedom to like sort out your schedules yourself. There was no routine like school where you go in at 8 a.m. and finish at 3 p.m. Like, you had to pick which classes you wanted to go to, which tutorials fit in with your different schedules and different units. There were university student clubs. And so I was getting involved in the Muslim Students Association, and yeah, just sort of immersing myself into this new environment, staying very curious of like what's going on, what does this place have to offer? Because yeah, obviously like you're paying hex, and so very mindful of that. Um, but yeah, so I remember, I guess, the first sort of advocacy action I ever took was when the bottom floor of the library was being refurbished and renovated. And we had like a little pop up cafe, and the staff, they were just beautiful. They were just lovely, friendly. Most were international students who had this as a part time job. And I remember the manager called Stella, who told me that since the renovation's happening, the university has removed the pop-up cafe completely from the plan. So they will be out of jobs, and we will no longer be able to like go into Reed Library and get our incredible coffees from these friendly faces. So my friend at the time, Chantel, and I were like, we've got to do something about this. Like, this is this is a grave injustice against all the students. So we started a petition, and every student who'd walk into that library, we were like standing by the door with our clipboard and the little, slip for people to sign the petition. And by the end of it, we had like 600 signatures within the first week, and we sent it to the vice chancellor, and we're like, no ways are we going to let you get rid of this cafe. And surprisingly, they included the cafe in the design of the bottom floor. And yeah, I remember it was such an incredible win, and Stella and I still stay in touch, which is just beautiful. But yeah,
That's the start of the political
it
career.
was. I didn't even see it as political, though. I was just like, this is an injustice. We need to do something about it. And if, as students, we don't say something, nothing's going to change.
So coffees have started or stopped revolutions.
That's definitely started.
They definitely started a
100%.
revolution. And so were you in student politics at the University of Western Australia?
Oh, so
How did you meet the ALP?
The ALP. So again, politics was never a thing, but I remember when I turned 18, Dad was like, we're voting for the Labor Party. No questions asked. They're the party for the immigrants and, diversity and all. Like, they're good to us and, they're for the working class. And I was like, all right, sure, Dad, no questions asked. It wasn't until Dad passed away in 2018 and I didn't know how to deal with my grief. So I just immersed myself in community volunteering. Just any opportunity, whether it was hosting and emceeing an event or running fundraisers or, helping at madrasas, whatever it was. I just needed to occupy my time because I didn't want to be quiet and silent and alone with my thoughts. And that's a whole different other story in terms of like how I had to deal with my grief. But I remember going to an event that I was emceeing, and there was a Labor MP that I invited to the stage to share a few words. And at the end of his speech, he was like, if you want to know what a Dana politician's life looks like, hit me up. And he had a very interesting name, Pierre Yang. I was like, it's a French and a Chinese name. It's amazing.
In Perth.
In Perth, like what? Anyways, so a few weeks later, I sort of sent him an email and I was like, he's not going to read it. Like, these politicians are so busy. And literally that afternoon, he got back and he was like, oh, come and meet me for a coffee at Parliament House. I was, oh my God, I haven't been to Parliament House. This is amazing. So by then, I was already serving my second term as the president of the of UWA's Muslim Students Association. So I was like, oh, this would be interesting. And anyways.
Sorry, call out for MSAs around Australia.
Oh, yeah, massive shout out to all the MSAs. We actually do such incredible work. So, and it's not easy, so lots of respect for the MSAs. So yeah, had a coffee catch up with Pierre, and this was in just before the 2019 election. And he was like, oh, do you want to hand out for election day? Like, do you want to get involved and stuff? And I was like, sure. I mean, I love volunteering. I've been volunteering all this time, so why not? And that's where my journey began. Like, I volunteered at the 2019 election. Labor lost miserably. And by the end of the day, on that Saturday, on election night, Pierre was like, do you want to work part-time in my office? And I was like, sure. And that's where I understood the Labor Party structure. I assumed roles in Young Labor, the youth wing of the party. And yeah, before I knew it, I was the first ever Muslim president of Young Labor. And we went on this massive recruitment drive of like, the first Young Labor meeting I went to, there was just a room filled with guys. Like, there were literally just 4 other girls. And it was like, yeah, we need to change this. It shouldn't just be young guys debating and pushing for motions that they think is important. What about the rest of us? So yeah, we went on a massive recruitment drive and recruited, so many people of diverse backgrounds. It's the saying, you can't be where you can't see, hit home so strongly during that time, where people would look at me and be like, oh wow, like, you're involved in politics. And again, for me, it wasn't like I'm in politics because I want to become an MP or I want to become a senator. It was like I saw this as a volunteering opportunity, and this is going to help me learn about the system. It's going to help me push for motions that are important to young people. I had already been doing it on a university level, so this is just the next natural step up. And yeah, I didn't know that that next step would have led me to United Workers Union as an organizer. And I was there for about a year and a half before I was tapped on the shoulder to run number 3 on the Senate ticket.
So just before we get to the Senate ticket and the circumstances
Yeah.
that occurred at that time, um, let me put a picture: Muslim, female, Afghan, Australian hijabi, running around recruiting, doing the numbers for Young Labour in Western Australia, flying backward and forwards to Broome and Albany and backward and for Esperance, doing the numbers. Wasn't that a fundamental change in what Young Labour looked like in Western Australia for like the 30 years I knew them?
100%. It was such a big shift. It was almost, yeah, like exponential in terms of the numbers of young people that would rock up to meetings. We had to actually cap our speaking time to a minute and a half because we're like, there's 50 motions we've got to get through. Like two hours isn't enough. But seeing just the diversity around the room, people from all walks of life being able to like contribute to discussions and debates, um, I just saw it as this is what modern day Australia looks like. So we should have representation. We should have voices at the table. We should hear people out. And because Labor had been in opposition for almost 9 years, for me, it was more. I don't know. There was this purpose, this drive of like we've got to overthrow the Liberal government. We've got to work so hard and get involved. So I remember doing flying squads, which essentially is getting a bunch of young people to go and door knock together. So, training them up, having the material, having the flyers, choosing different locations, making the turnout calls and then like treating them with a sundowner or like a barbecue on the weekend to keep them motivated. So I did feel like all that volunteering um made it feel like I had like 2 full-time jobs. It was insane. To the point where my mom was like, "We barely get to see you on the weekends. Like, what is this? You're just working for free. How is this even helping you and your future?" Like, and I was like, "But I enjoy doing this. This is my contribution to the Australian society. This is me getting involved." And again, it nowhere in that whole space of time did I think, oh, this is going to lead me to become an MP one day, like, because I still had that imposter syndrome. Though those moments where you're like, but I didn't study politics and law at school. I didn't do, politics and law at university or international relations. Like, I'm still learning. This is all just a learning process. And I was just um hungry for more knowledge, for more experiences, for just yeah, just figuring out where things are and what's happening with the world. And yeah, that curiosity definitely led me to a lot of places.
You also created a bit of a political wave in Young Labour in Western Australia. And the things you're describing, the door knocking, the calls, the squads, are the classic tools of political training, identified by everybody ever involved in Liberal Labor, Calathumpian, which are amazing skills for any young person, political career or not. That's my view. Is that your view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are such translatable skills that will assist in any industry, in any sector that people go to, because it improves your persuasion skills, like you're able to really get on the phone, talk to somebody who may be on the complete end of the spectrum, but how you converse with them and bring them closer is definitely an art, like it's a skill. Um, yeah, the level of confidence you build, breaking down those barriers for people. So something simple I did as Young Labor president was I stopped having meetings, Young Labor meetings at TAVs and at bars because I knew there were a certain cohort of young people that didn't feel comfortable. And so all I did was just say, oh, guys, to make it accessible to every young person out there, we'll host the meeting on university grounds, hire out a lecture room or a tutorial room, or like do it at various community centers or just places where people could come together, we'll debate, have our conversations, have the water and soft drinks and refreshments. But if people wanted to go out for a drink afterwards, that's your choice, mate. You can go have a great night with your friends. But during the meeting, there's no need for alcohol during the meeting, you know, like, and it was a wonderful shift and people didn't even realize that that's what was happening. But, the numbers continued increasing, and young people's engagement in politics began to normalize as just a way of being, strong vocal advocates. And we could agree to disagree on various things, but it's how do we come together? How do you organize? How do you build support? How do you make sure you've got someone to second your motion? All these little skills that, I would say developed that young cohort during my time.
You finished university, which you finished your first degree in anthropology
Yep.
and sociology.
Mhm.
And you wanted to still become a pharmacist, I would imagine, or you're contemplating it. And then you joined the United Workers Union.
Yeah.
So tell me about the United Workers Union for those who don't know. Is it left? Is it right?
Yeah.
What does it stand for?
So United Workers Union in WA is the biggest union. They have like a really high membership density. They are left leaning on the spectrum, and a lot of the state Labor MPs are affiliated with United Workers Union. So when I joined as an organizer, I was working on various campaigns from aged care to early childhood education to laundry workers to chicken factory workers. And these were highly feminized immigrant industries where seeing somebody that looked like me walk through the doors and tell them about their working rights and how their working conditions can be improved and what a strike is going to look like, what an EBA is and how that's going to look like on the ground. And it was remarkable. Like I learnt so much during that time, but at the same time, it was also, I almost had this little secret way of connecting with people where they just saw me as one of them. Like they were like, oh, she clearly is an immigrant as well. Like, and that trust would have been established a lot faster than if it was a middle-aged white woman coming into the space and saying, this is how I think things should run. So it allowed a lot of our members to feel more comfortable airing grievances and issues with the workplace. So yeah, I again, for me, it was an eye-opening experience because I would hear stories of my dad being overworked and underpaid and, abused in the workplace because English was his second language and he really didn't know about his rights. He didn't know what a union was. So that just, gave me more of a purpose and a drive to be like, well, if my dad went through all that, how many other immigrants who may not know about their working conditions, how many of them are being abused? So yeah, again, at nowhere during that time was I like, I'm going to run for office. I was just like, this is a great
But you still,
experience.
you were 24, 25?
I was 26.
26.
Yeah.
You're still but you were the president of Young Labor.
Yeah.
You were a chief organizer, caucus convener.
A lot of people would say you're a political hack.
Yeah.
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 So,
That's the classic political hack.
so on paper,
career
on
path,
paper-
it's linear. It's linear, right?
God, yeah.
Similar to mine, in terms of being, but I was a political hack at a central casting. And so tell me about the fated days when you got onto the Western Australian ticket for Senate as number 3. Talk me through that.
So when I was tapped on the shoulder, like, hey, do you want to run on the Senate ticket? I was like, no. My immediate answer was like, no. And they were like, I remember my boss back then saying, you're not going to win it because since 1984, Labor hasn't won the third spot. And I was like, oh, okay. So that just means I continue campaigning and help all the other candidates. And they're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm down. And then we came across the hurdle of my citizenship. So I was born in Afghanistan, in Kabul. Um, so that would make me a dual citizen. But because the fall of Kabul had literally happened a few months prior, in 2021, there was no official channels of communication. The embassy in Australia obviously had no links to the Taliban. The Australian government didn't recognize the Taliban as an official authority there. So it was like we had sought so many, we'd sought out legal advice from so many lawyers and uh, finally came to the understanding that there is no ways I can renounce my citizenship. And so we presented the case and, finally my whole candidacy was official and, the pre-selection took place and all that. But it was sort of, I wouldn't say, I mean, actually, I would say I was used to go and engage with various multicultural communities to showcase, oh my goodness, Labor has pre-selected the first hijab-wearing Senate candidate. The Muslim community in particular didn't know what was going on. They were like, oh, so are you running for like council? I'm like, no, this is the Senate. This is like federal level. But again, there was that knowledge gap. So it just meant that people just didn't know. And they were like, how? How has Labor pre-selected you? Like, it just didn't make sense to them. Because again, their understanding of senators was, you've got to be at least 40 plus. Why, as a 26, 27-year-old, have you been pre-selected? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But I still campaigned. So, like, all the lower house candidates, I would recruit members in their areas. I would call on members to come and door knock and phone bank and put out signs in front of their yards. And yeah, like that entire sort of 3-4 months until the election was chock-a-blocks. Like, it was insane. And that's when Jacob was appointed as my campaign manager, because he was managing my campaign and a few other lower house. But because with Senate campaigns, the only instructions I got was, here's your Facebook page. You can create Instagram if you want and just put posts about Labor. If you go to events, just take selfies or photos and just talk about how people should be voting Labor. I was like, sure. And we literally created cute little badges, vote 1 for Labor. And yeah, so Jacob had, I think it was like 2 months solid where we had just been campaigning together. He would go to mosques with me. He would go to various multicultural events and festivals, and he just got to see a side of the Muslim community that he never knew. And yeah, like the election night, when my position came close to being in contention, I was like, this is not possible. This cannot happen. Like, I am not prepared for this. Like, you get all these doubts and questions, like, what's going to happen if I actually get elected? My mom was in absolute denial. There was like, no, she's like, until I see it, I won't believe it. And yeah, 4 weeks later, I was announced as the number 3 senator in WA, Labor senator in WA.
And that hadn't happened since 1984.
Way before I was born. So
when I was in year 7. And so I'm going to ask you about Jacob in a moment, but so how did it feel at that time when all of a sudden, 26-year-old, working for a union as an organizer, clearly a political hack out of Central Casting, just happened to have a scarf on with an Aussie accent, but not ready to hit the national stage? What was going through your mind? Like, what do you do?
I just leaned very heavily on the union and the senators that were already in those positions that were affiliated with the United Workers Union, because I was like, I need mentorship. I need to sort of have my hand held to a certain extent, because yes, I know where we've all started and what the vision is, what the goal is, and it's great that we've helped elect a Labor government. What is that going to mean on the ground? How's that going to translate into action? And then obviously now I realize that I've got 5 full-time staffers that are allocated to me, and I've got an office, and I've got it's I don't think any amount of like exposure to the political world's ever going to prepare you for that, because it's just next level. And I remember going to Senate school a few weeks before 1st of July, which is when our term begins, and it was like information overload. There's various budgets that they talk about, all these requirements, the disclosures, the declarations, Senate procedures, what happens during sitting weeks, what happens outside of sitting weeks, how much commitment you have to the party. Like, it's insane. It is not what the textbooks say about Parliament. Um, but there was this sense of hope in me. I was like, man, this is great for democracy. This is great for our nation. This is going to give us so much more opportunity to like achieve all the things that we have been fighting for and campaigning for the last 2-3 years.
A 26-year-old would say that.
100%. I was like so optimistic. I was like, yes, we're finally in government and we can make so much change happen.
And the 26-year-old is usually the person applying for one of those jobs, that 5 jobs, to like their first out of university, get in, and all of a sudden you're running the office, and optimism, hope, and defiance of all the facts on the ground is like clearly one of the mandates. So you get mentorship, lean on ALP, lean on your Senate colleagues. What happens in the intervening period between when I really got to know you really well? What happens in the Parliament between what date were you elected? The 1st of July, 2022?
Yes.
2022 till June, 2 years later, effectively. 2024. Talk to me through that period.
So I was paper perfect, I was the prime candidate that Labor had always wanted. I was doing everything by the book. I was tending to my political duties to the party and to my Senate duties. And because I was the youngest in the 47th Parliament, Labor was just lapping all the attention up. Sent me on 5 international delegations, showcasing to the world, look what we've been able to elect. Like, this is Australia. And they were predominantly Muslim countries, Bahrain, Indonesia, Malaysia. It wasn't until 7th of October, 2023, that the veil was removed from my eyes. The optimism turned into realism. I had to appreciate what was going on actually on the ground, how the party operated, where it was, the wishes of the leadership before what the party, which includes the members, the unionists, the rank and file, their wishes or position, or what the resolution they'd come to through various conferences that we took part in, that didn't matter. And that was like the biggest wake up call of my life. I was like, wait, we literally had a state conference and we had a national conference, and in those conferences we said that the next Labor government will prioritize the recognition of the state of Palestine. And that's just one example of the many. Like when the gas strategy came out, I was like, bro, what? This is not what our platform says. Our party platform is very clear in its mandate. And this is the mandate given by voters and the members that pay their membership dues to make sure that Labor continues doing the great work it's doing. But we're in a position of power now. We've won government. We can enact change, and yet we're choosing not to. Like, it just didn't add up. I was like, why? What possible good reason is the leadership going to give me that will justify us turning our backs on the party platform? Or is the party platform a meaningless document? Is it just for show? Is it just to placate our members? Like, it was, because again, that authentic, genuine form of leadership that I expected, because that's what I expected of myself, I expected of the leadership as well. I just didn't see it. I was told we're a small fish in a big pond. It's not up to us to decide. We are in government, so we need to be responsible. What is so responsible about what we're doing, turning a blind eye to a genocide? Fine, you don't want to use the G word? You're going to corner me, you're going to suffocate me in what I say, where I go, to the point where my 5 staffers, who are also labor hacks, were spying on me. They would be telling the government of my movements. They would be telling my seniors or those in the union executives what I was doing, who I was meeting with. And you feel like you can't trust anyone. And meanwhile, every branch meeting I went to, I was being pushed. The same branch, the multicultural labor branch that I was the secretary of for 3 years, they would be like, you've gotten elected. You need to use your platform to speak up, to use your voice. And I'm like, but my speeches get reviewed and they get edited. I'm literally told what I can say and what I can't say. I'm constantly monitored and I've got tabs on me. I can't go to a university and talk to students who are, demonstrating or that they've got an encampment going on for weeks. I can't just go and meet them and say, I'm here to listen. I can't promise you anything because I'm not the Prime Minister, I'm not the Foreign Minister, but I'm here to listen. But if I can't do the basics of my job and listen to our constituents, then what the hell am I doing here? Why? Why was I elected? What, to keep a seat warm? To be just another number? It came to a point where I would go to events, whether it was within the multicultural community, whether it was just rank and file members, whether it was Muslim community, and I would be surrounded by people just constantly asking me questions, to the point where it became intimidating. I was at an iftar dinner and I had simply presented my keynote speech and then went to pray, and I had a ring of ladies just come around me and say, do you not have a heart? Do you not see the babies being blown up into pieces? How do you live with yourself? How do you sleep at night? To the point where you're like, oh my goodness. And they would say, we didn't vote for Labour to see this day. What makes you different to the Liberals? I thought you guys had a moral compass, that you had a strong backbone. What is going on? What's happening behind those closed doors? And meanwhile, I knew that if I was to raise anything in the full entire caucus meetings, things would be leaked. Because this was the first advice I was given to by one of my mentors. Do not say anything that you don't want leaked. So I would go directly to the foreign minister and sit down with her in her office and be like, can we do something? We've got to do something. We cannot keep silent. How much more are we going to just keep deflecting and saying Israel has the right to defend itself? Especially when we were condemning Russia to the whole nother level for invading Ukraine. And I think that moment where I was at the encampment and I realized that I was literally being tracked and monitored. And I knew that when I returned to Canberra in the next few days, that it would be the anniversary of Nakba. And I was like, I'm going to call it what it is. I know this is a big call. I know I'll be calling out the Prime Minister and I'll be posing questions like, how many more murdered limbs of children do you need to see to call it a genocide? And I know I'm going to get in trouble, but I need to say it. And so I did.
We all know the outcome of that. Talk me through what was going through your mind when you were thinking about the getting into trouble bit? Because for me, that's reminiscent of whether someone agrees with you or doesn't agree with you, whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing. It, it's a picture of, Tiananmen Square with the tanks firing at you and you're one person, because you're only one person. Young, 27, 28-year-old by that stage.
And I'd just gotten married 4 months ago.
Member by accident, just got married, hijabi, Muslim Afghan woman, making a big call like that. Given that you're officially now a political hack, you've got that skill set. You would have known what was coming next. What was going through your mind when you said, I'm gonna throw this away. I'm gonna do it."
I would like to think that I wasn't jaded by the political system. Yes, I may have been a hack, but I also had a conscience that I couldn't just switch off and be like, sit down. And the pressures came when I realized that, yes, the party is not going to budge, because I've had various conversations, especially after Zombie Franken was killed. Like, I thought that was going to be a turning point for the Labor government, but nope, there wasn't. So there were a few dilemmas. I was like, okay, so if I call it out, my caucus, my left caucus, because I was in the left faction, are going to come down on me. But I can then have a position and say, well, somebody's got to say something from our ranks. And because I'm a small little backbencher, it shouldn't matter. It's not a minister that's coming out. It's just a backbencher, yeah? But this would hopefully give some level of hope to our membership base to sort of ease the pressure off us. But that could go in two ways, where I call it a genocide and I've clearly, disobeyed rules. I didn't exactly know what the punishment was going to be, because it's not like crossing the floor. I knew when I was crossing the floor that this is going to lead to my expulsion. But I was like, maybe the Prime Minister is going to tell me off. I'm like, naughty girl, why'd you do that? But it could have ramifications on my husband's job, because he was a senior advisor to a state minister for the Labor Party. And again, he's also a Labor Party hack. So, but I was like, well, because I'm federal, he's state, maybe there isn't much of a ramification. So I was like, it won't matter. I had seen a Jewish colleague make statements that was contrary to the government's position, and nothing visibly public was done to him. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that too. But to my surprise, people came a lot harder on me than they did on him. And when I raised that disparity and that double standards, they were like, well, he's in the right faction. The right faction do things differently to us in the left faction. I'm like, that's bullshit. I'm sorry, but we're from the same party. We're from the same party who's in government. So if he gets to say what he wants and get away with it, bro, why are you guys going hard on me? And then lead up to, obviously, there were murmurs about the Greens putting the motion on the recognition of the state of Palestine. So mind you, once I'd called it a genocide, things were starting to be removed off. My roles and duties were being reduced. So I was told not to go to protests. I was given fewer speaking positions within the Senate, or allocated speaking slots. I was removed from the Foreign Affairs and Trade Committee. And again, it was just all these punishments where I didn't see it happen to my other colleague. And I was like, wow, like the double standard is insane. His office gets graffitied and there is like a presser by the Prime Minister or senior ministers. I get hate mail and death threats, it's silence. Like somebody from the Prime Minister's office just sends me a message saying, "Hope you're okay. Let us know if you need anything." Are you serious? So you use me when it suits your agenda, when it makes you look so inclusive and amazing, but when the same treatment's happening, where my life's threatened, my family's being impacted, my health is being impacted, you say, "Oh, that's really tough. Maybe you should take a 2-week break. How about you go and we'll clear your schedule? Just take your mind off things." That's not going to stop the genocide. That's not going to help our members on the ground here, the communities that we're hurting. Because that's like the double standards in our actions towards these two communities is what's causing the lack of social cohesion. But the government's rhetoric around social cohesion was more to just silence one group and say, stay in your lane. But the other group, you have all the attention. So, like, if we had the same standard applied to both, it wouldn't have been an issue. But it was the disparity that I was like, this is not okay. This is not why we were elected. And yeah, so when crossing the floor, that whole conundrum, like the question had been posed and a lot was going on in the background. Every other day, a minister would contact me and try to organize a coffee catch up. And so when I would sit, they would try to dangle all sorts of carrots in front of my face. Think about it. In a few years' time, you could be a minister. You got to think about the longer vision here. This isn't just one thing. Yeah, but this is happening under our watch. How are we allowing this to happen? It just felt like this uphill battle that I just couldn't win. I was pushing and resisting, and I was like, I can't change you guys. I can't change the position you're like stuck on. I'm trying to help. And it was that moment where I was sat with the union executives. And they were like, look, you got married 4 months ago. Politics isn't for everyone, It's really tough. Maybe you can move on and settle down and start a family. That was the moment where I was like, I can't believe I heard that escaping your lips. If I was a middle-aged white man, you would never have said that. But because I'm a hijab wearing, woman of color, Muslim, you're like, what are you good for? Go have some babies. It's disgusting. And that just fueled the fire in me to be like, I'm going hard or I'm going home. This isn't the party. This isn't what I signed up for. If we can't stick to the very principle we've got in our platform and that we promise to our voters, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And I don't care if it costs me and if it costs my husband, because I had to sit him down and be like, honey, you can lose your job.
And did he lose his job?
He definitely lost his job. It was literally a day after I resigned from the Labour Party. 4th of July. The irony that it's Independence Day in the US, so.
They did make him independent.
But it's honestly it was the most difficult, but the most liberating decision of my life. And I will never look back and I'll never regret it. Because the grass is so much greener on the other side now that I've come out the other end, because I can be my true authentic self and represent my state, the beautiful state of Western Australia, unapologetically in the Senate, because that's what the Senate was made for.
Let me, you made your decision, you crossed the floor. You then doubled down on TV. Said, would you do it? Yes, I'd do it again.
100%.
Is there any other way you could have done it? Is there any other way you could have arrested that, the obviously really difficult situation that you could have not crossed the floor, not got the ire of the Prime Minister. And I'm being devil's advocate here. That could have been more convenient in the interest of effective for Fatima and Jacob.
100%. If this was about me and my political future and my career trajectory, 100%, I would have just kept on regurgitating the party lines. I would have probably kept my head low and just completely ignore what was going on. But something that I am forever grateful to my mum and dad is they raised their children with conscience. And they were always of the belief that you fight for justice even if it's against yourself. And again, yes, I may have been a political hack, but I was not a career politician. This was the hill that I was willing to die on. Because again, I needed to live with myself, and I needed to be able to look my children in the eye in the future and be like, your mum stood for something. And actually mean it, you know? Not that, standing up for something that's just in the philosophical terms. And I don't know. I mean, what I did hadn't happened for like 40 years for a Labour government senator to cross the floor. So the party had no idea how to deal with it. And I definitely shook up the establishment. But also showed young people out there that you can question authority. You can question the status quo. You can challenge the status quo. You don't have to just, accept what's dished out to you. Because we're living in a very different world. You know, what the Labour Party gave me was a seat at the table. But they didn't want to hear my voice. They didn't want to have anything to do with my perspective, my lived experience, what I brought to the table. They're just like, you look great in that photo. Just stay there. Just look pretty in a photo. But that's not what we're here for. And change doesn't happen by you just going with the flow. You've got to challenge things. It's got to be uncomfortable. You've got to reach a breaking point. And I did. I was hospitalized like 3 times with like severe migraines. At 28, 29, I'm taking blood pressure medication. Like it wasn't a simple decision that I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to cross the floor, la-di-da. So for me to double down and say I would do it again, because the rhetoric that was being spread is, oh, she's a vulnerable young woman. She was under so much pressure. She just did it. This decision was just out of the whim, and she wouldn't do that. No, she's a caucus solidarity. I was like, no. Bring that question again and I'll do the same thing.
So you cross the floor. You're married to Jacob. 4 months later, he loses his job the next day with the Australian Labor Party. What was the plan? What happened next?
So the plan was to come up with a strategy of running in the next election. And what that was going to mean as a crossbench independent Western Australian senator. Because again, having to fight the narrative that the Labor Party was backgrounding journos was, she's a one-trick pony, she only cares about Muslims, she only cares about Palestine, she's no good to Western Australia. So we embarked on this 12 towns in 12 days tour around WA immediately after I would cross the floor, because I was like, I need to show WA that I'm there for them now. I don't have any particular political agendas here aside from purely representing the interest of my state. And in the process, we were like, okay, so if we were to run in the 2025 election, we need to have a party. So Jacob was obviously, having lost his job, he then became full-time working on establishing the party. Australia's Voice came into fruition. We announced it by October, And by end of December, it was confirmed and registered as a political party. And it was a very steep learning curve. Nobody tells you what it's like to run a political party, the amount of donations you need, the infrastructure support, um, the membership, how you manage that. So, from establishing a website to creating merch to having various tiers of membership, like it was a lot. So, there were definitely moments where Jacob and I would pull 15-hour days, 16-hour days. We'd wake up, talk about politics all the way till we went to bed. So it was wonderful that immediately after getting married, we were able to spend so much time together.
Politicking.
Politicking, absolutely, day in, day out, 24 hours a day. And that just strengthened our marriage and took it to another level. But yeah, Australia's Voice did incredible at the election. So we were able to run candidates, fundraise, all within like 6 to 7 weeks prior to the election. And it was wonderful to see the shift in, people wanting to see an alternative to the major parties.
The election of 2025.
This is the election of 2025. And come election day, the support was phenomenal. Like, I did not expect to have 120,000 Australians vote for Australia's Voice. There was a fair amount of people who actually didn't know Australia's Voice was tied to me. So if I had my name on it, like, Pauline Hanson's One Nation or Jackie Lambie's network, I would have probably received a lot more support. But these were all little learnings that we, accumulated along the way. But I guess the biggest message that we got during the election was we need to hold the government to account. And people wanted to see that sort of transparent leadership in politics and representation. So I've just been trying to fight back the narrative that, I'm not a Muslim senator who happens to represent WA. I'm a West Australian senator who happens to be a Muslim. And I've been speaking and fighting and advocating for a diverse range of topics, from housing to climate action to renewable energy to aged care support to early childhood education to, the amount of HECS debt a lot of our university students are accumulating. Like, policy reforms that are just common sense and makes, that everyday Australians are like, why is the government taking the back foot on this, right?
You also do great TikToks about all your ops.
100%. Love it. I think the 2 skibbity or the brain rot speeches that I've done has really engaged the younger audience. Like, yeah, I'm no longer, the 26-year-old that came into Parliament or 27-year-old that came into Parliament, but I still want young people to know that their voices matter and that they should be part of the conversation and policy making as much as adults. So yeah, it's been great to sort of be the youth voice in Parliament.
Tell me, how are you different to the Greens, and what really distinguishes you as a, oppositionist party effectively between Labor and Liberal in the Senate?
Yeah, look, a lot of people say, oh, well, now that Dorinda Cox has moved from the Greens to Labor, like, there's a clear vacancy, like, you should join the Greens. And it's like, I didn't leave the Labor Party from one party's shackles to put myself in another party's shackles. Because as much as the Greens talk about a conscience vote, we actually haven't seen any of them exercise it. I mean, the last sort of conscience vote there was Lydia Thorpe, and she left the Greens on the matter of the voice referendum. So what I've, especially in the new Parliament, what I've been calling the Greens is the new Greens, is because they do have a unique opportunity in the Senate as holding the balance of power and really pushing the government to fight for that, to fight for common sense reforms and ensure that there's transparency and integrity that's upheld across. But I feel like because they're holding the balance of power, they're kind of losing their fundamental values. Because it's been like 4 instances now where I've presented a motion calling on the government to be scrutinized or presenting an inquiry to investigate further on like what the government's doing on a particular matter, and the Greens vote it down. And I literally look at them like, aren't you guys all about transparency and integrity? I mean, this is where it matters, right? Like, I'm calling for further scrutiny on the decisions the government's making, and yet you are having this protection racket around the Labor Party and voting my motion down. Like, the crossbench, our role is fundamentally to hold the government to account. But we're not able to do that if the Greens are constantly siding with the government because they've got backroom deals. You know, like it is really, and I mean, the Australian exposed them with the new refurbished party room. And, you know, like it's just disappointing because that's not the Greens I had come to know. And I'm just like, guys, come on, don't let these political negotiations and deals distance you from your base, from the fundamentals of your party. So I just hope that it's just a few instances and they come around. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't, you know, there are no intentions for me joining the Greens. But yeah, we're very different.
No joining the Greens anytime. Even though you're wearing green today, you're flying their colours.
Not the green. It suits me, but yeah, not the political party.
It does. Also, the Islamic colours.
100%.
I ask my guests a few questions at the end of an interview or podcast, sorry. And they're short, sharp, to the point questions. And I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. What's the misconception about Fatima Payman?
That I'm angry and divisive. I think I'm very collegiate and friendly. And a lot of people, when they meet me in person, are like, oh my God, you're so friendly and approachable. And I'm like, yeah, you just see the angry side of me when I'm like in the chamber.
It's the hijab that does it. What's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, that's a hard one. I would say a cheesy beef meat pie with chili.
It's a good one. If there's one thing you can live without, family aside, that you can't live without, what would it be?
Oh, my noise cancelling headphones. I carry it everywhere. They're amazing. They've been with me for 5 years now.
Very TikTok-y. If there's one thing, and I should ask this question, but it's very different with you, and you'll see why. If you were a younger Fatima Payman, you barely turned 30.
Yeah.
But if you were younger, a 21-year-old Fatima Payman, going
18.
back. 18.
Yeah.
And this Fatima Payman can whisper one thing in her ear as she walked out that door. What would you say to her?
Don't minimize yourself to fit in. You know, use the different traits that you bring to the table as your strength.
Got one more. What would you say to all young women out there if you could say one thing to them?
Be unapologetically yourself. And you're beautiful just the way you are. Because, yeah, I know a lot of young women in particular over there, out there just struggle with, you know, fitting into a particular mold. But yeah, I would say just be your unapologetic self.
Senator Fatima Payman, thank you for coming on Uncommon Ground.
Thank you so much for having me, Talal.
Thanks for listening. If you've got something out of this conversation, I encourage you to share it, rate it, or leave a review, as it really helps others find the show. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that button on your podcast app or on YouTube at Talal Yassin. We drop new episodes every fortnight, each one a deep dive with someone who isn't afraid to speak their mind and stand their ground. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.